Helen opened up the door to the flower shop where she worked. She worked in this flower shop and she owned it as well. The door was glass and metal. It was bronze and metal. It shone in the sun. And when the sun glinted on it, all the passers-by saw the light of the glass and the bronze and how it framed, both in the door and in the window, all of these flowers, every color you can imagine, every shade of every color you could imagine, the reds, magentas, burgundies, maroons, the blues, the purples that were deep, the purples that looked pink, the blues that you couldn't tell if they were blue or purple, and the blues that you knew were blue. And there were yellows and oranges and mustards and even some green flowers and whites and black and brown and leaves, so many leaves and berries and twigs and just every color and every texture you could imagine. The whole place was filled with them bursting. And how are they stored, you ask? Because this is a flower shop, you have to store them. You store them in water in buckets. Some of them were in refrigerators and some of them were on the ground and some were in elevations. And it just felt like this place was bursting with life and energy. But Helen knew, even though it felt that way, she worked so hard to make it feel that way for her customers and for herself because she loved being there. But she knew that sometimes you could feel all this energy of life, but you would know that it's also leaving. These flowers were all cut. And once flowers are cut, their lifespan grows shorter. Even when they're not cut, nothing lives forever. Helen wished if there was one thing she could do to transform her business, she wished she could find a way to make her flowers live forever. And so she tried everything. She would put nutrients in the water. She tried saying prayers and casting spells and lighting candles and surrounding them in stones and dreaming for them. Helen remembered her mother and her father and how they loved the flowers, and she thought, if there was some way I could take a piece of their memory and bring it into this flower shop, maybe the flowers will stay alive just as much as my parents' memory. So she did that, and she told herself the story of how she was named Helen. She was named Helen after heliotropes, which are these flowers, blue and purple. But she liked to think of them as yellow, even though she knew they weren't. That's just how they looked in her mind. That according to Greek mythology, there was a god and a girl, and the girl loved the god. And it didn't work out. But the god transformed her into flowers that would follow him everywhere and follow the sun through the sky. And Helen thought, maybe there's a way I can get all these flowers to follow the sun every day through the sky. Helen got herself the biggest flatbed truck you have ever seen, ever. It was yards and yards and yards of flatbeds on wheels, and her little van at the top of the procession. In the van, aside from herself, of course, she kept extra water and extra nutrients for the flowers. She kept misters and spray cans and watering cans and twine and scissors and pruning shears and gloves and anything she thought she might need along the way. And she also picked herself some snacks. When you go on a road trip, you have to have good snacks. That's number one rule of road trips, right? And she got all that together, and she moved all the flowers in their buckets from the shop into the flatbed truck. She locked up the metal doors. She locked up the shop and put up a sign saying, "Out searching for dreams and for eternal flowers. Be back soon," so that her customers would know she was still thinking of them. And she wasn't really going anywhere, just going everywhere. And so once all the flowers were on this truck, she rode. She followed the sun. She followed the sun every day. If there was some shade on the road or an overpass, she would have to just go through as quickly as she could. And when there was a great sunny field, she would pull over and let the flowers enjoy the sun for a while. And she tried to chase the light. She would drive through time zones to try to keep up with the sun all day so her flowers could do it. But that is exhausting. You know, no person can go without sleep. You just can't. You need sleep. But Helen tried, and so she took some energy drinks, and she did chants, and she tried interesting new sleep cycles that wherever she found the sunlight, she would take a nap under the truck so that she could get a little shade and hope she would wake up in time to move to the next light. But you know, after a little time of this, Helen was just exhausted and she just couldn't keep doing it. The flowers looked so fresh. All the colors are still in bloom, and she was doing a great job of pruning them and making sure that they stayed all right, and changing their water and making sure they were at the right temperatures and the wind was okay and everything. And she was taking such good care of them, and she was so exhausted. She didn't know how much more of it she could take, but she wanted to keep going. Once, when she was checking the buckets of water and when she was changing the water, she saw the water in that metal pail start to swirl. She heard it call to her, and it said, "Helen, Helen, please. Water isn't just for plants, it's for people too. You need to take care of yourself. These flowers won't last without you. They won't last with you either. Flowers aren't meant to be forever." Helen said, "Of course flowers are meant to be forever. I chase the sun. That's my namesake, and I have to do it. It's my destiny. I have to find a way." And the water said, "Helen, you know better than anything, better than anyone, that life doesn't last like that. And you're losing your life trying to give it to these flowers. These flowers don't want that. They're not meant to live that long. They have a lifespan just like you, and yours is longer. You need to live your life." And she said, "What are you talking about? My life is on this road with these flowers. My life is in this truck. My life is these snacks. My life is the shears and the gloves and this equipment. This is my life. I love it. I don't want to stop." And the water said, "I know you don't want to stop. I know no matter what, you're always going to be connected to these flowers. These flowers will always love you, but life isn't just flowers. It has seasons, and it's cold sometimes, and sometimes the leaves need to fall and the flowers need to go to seed, and it can't always be in bloom." And she said, "I'm going to chase the sun, and I'm telling you it's always going to be in bloom. I will always find a place where it's in bloom." And the water said, "If anyone knows about this, it's me. I flow everywhere. I've been everywhere. You could spend your whole life traveling like that, or you can find your pond." She said, "Of course I'm going to flow like you. Of course I'm going to keep looking. I'm not going to leave these flowers to die." The water said, "I don't think you remember. When flowers die, they don't just They're not just gone, they're not just memories, they feed the soil. They disintegrate, but they give themselves to new life so that when next year's flowers come, they will have been born of these flowers. It is not just one flower for itself. It's not just one bucket of flowers for itself, and it's not just one bucket of water for itself. We all renew each other. Just because it doesn't always look beautiful or colorful or doesn't look to you full of life, it is life. It's just life in another stage. And it'll always be here, just like your parents are always with you through your name. And one day, Helen, when you're not here anymore, there's going to be something that carries you on too. Helen said, I can't think about that. It was too hard when I lost my parents. I just can't think about it. My goal is to keep these flowers alive, and that's it. And the water said, Helen, I know, Helen. But I think you should drive back to your shop and to your customers. And you don't have to have the answers right now, but just on the drive back, you can think about it. Just think about it. How do you want to live on? Or if you don't care about that, how are you going to accept that these flowers won't be here forever? And that's okay. And you won't either, and that's okay. But you have to figure out how you're going to take care of yourself while you're here. And that's how you'll figure out what comes next. Helen didn't want to hear it. She tossed the water in that bucket. She filled it with new water. But the water that had been in that bucket, it was tossed into grass. And the water, just because it's poured out, it doesn't go. It goes into the ground. And it fed the grass. And it fed the flowers in that field. And it fed the trees. And it got back to the sea eventually. And Helen was tired. And she did drive back to the shop because she didn't know where else to go. She had no more energy left. And the flowers were drooping. She just couldn't keep up to the sun. She reached the coasts and there was nowhere to go. So she drove back home to her shop. And she didn't have the answers. But she kept thinking about it. One day, when the shop was replenished and the flowers were blooming, a couple little kids came in. And they were sniffing the flowers that were in the buckets on the floor that could reach just up to their noses. And they asked her, can you explain to me why there are so many kinds of flowers? She said, I'd love to tell you. And she did. And then more kids kept coming back. And more people asked her. And she told them. And Helen lived through those stories. The end.